let's continue here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at this scripture, John 12:3-8. And we've already talked about this story a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Mary then took a pound of very expensive perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair.
Mm-hmm.
And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who intended to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the proceeds given to the poor people?"
Mm-hmm.
Now he said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And as he kept the money box, he used to steal from what was put into it. Therefore, Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for me, keep it for the day of my burial. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." All right. So I think there's a couple things about this scripture that I think are worth looking at. We've kind of talked about it. First of all, this stuff is worth a lot of money.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Well, I know we've talked about this before. 300 denarii. They said it cost 200 denarii to feed the 5,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can feed an estimated 7,500 with this. Right. Now, I think the first thing that we kind of look at this is, and I feel this is true in some senses, but not all senses. Right. But I think there is a lot of criticism, and I would wager that the woman from TikTok, I would probably put her in this boat. There's a level of covetousness.
Yeah.
And there's a level of moral superiority or self-righteousness.
Oh, yeah.
When someone goes around trying to prove that the church isn't charitable enough.
Right.
Right. Or doesn't give enough. Or maybe there's a personal story where somebody didn't give you something you were in need of.
Right.
And so you use that to judge the entire global church.
Right.
For this. So I think sometimes when someone says this, the first thing I ask myself is, well, why are they saying this?
Right.
Why are they?
Well, like just look at Judas. Like Judas uses his own puffs him up with self-righteousness. We could help so many people with this money. But yet what he completely fails to realize is that what she's doing this is the Lord.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he completely misses the point of what she's trying to do for Jesus.
And Jesus sees what she's doing as more important.
Right.
I think this is something that we have to grasp. And I think this can be hard for us to grasp sometimes, especially if we have a real strong sense of empathy or a real strong sense of charity. Jesus prioritizes worship of God over giving to the needy.
Right.
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 So I think that can be tough to hear. But like when Jesus preaches, like I came to give good news to the poor. He didn't come to give money to the poor.
Right.
He came to tell them that this state is not like their life is not defined and their joy is not defined by their
right. And this is what's really interesting about Jesus's words, and I think we need to hear this, is he says, "The poor you will always have with you."
Right.
Jesus is saying, and we're going to talk more, so don't tune out, but just hear me.
Yeah.
You can't solve this problem.
Right. Well,
you will not solve this problem.
And we've talked about that before, yeah.
Right. And so I think that's important to understand, is that Jesus is saying this problem is too big for money.
Yeah.
It needs me. And I think that gets at the heart of really kind of where we're going with this, because I do think, like you said, we look at the church as a charity.
Yeah.
And it is charitable.
Yeah.
But that's not why we're here.
Right.
Yeah,
I think you're exactly right. I think I've also heard it expressed this way with this particular story. When he says the poor you always have with you, he's kind of saying to Judas, you don't have to be at the table with me.
Right.
You can take of your money.
Right.
And you can walk out there and give it to the poor.
Right.
If you think that it is so important,
right,
what is stopping you?
Why don't you do it? Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And this is something that I would challenge anyone who's criticizing the church about how much they've given charitably.
Right.
How much of your wealth have you given?
Right.
Well, I don't have a lot of money. Well, guess what? A lot of churches don't have a lot of money either.
Right.
So I think there's maybe a double standard in that.
Yes.
Of like, well, they should be giving.
Right.
But like, I'm not in a place to be able to give.
They assume that the church has all sorts of money.
Right. Now,
and Jesus didn't have all sorts of money either.
No,
Yeah.
No. And so here's the thing. When we start to approach a topic like this, I think it's important. We tend to start with let's refute the claim.
Right.
but then let's talk about what's right.
Right. Yeah.
And let's talk about why that claim feels right.
Yeah.
Because there's oftentimes a nugget of truth in there.
Right. Sure.
And when we started this, we said we should ask ourselves this question. What should we be doing?
Right.
And, but I think it's first to start by dispelling the conversation that,
Right.
well, Jesus would have just given money to anyone who walked up and asked him for it.
Right.
Right? I don't think we see an example of that.
We don't see a single example where Jesus gives someone money. In fact, giving to the poor, probably what Judas is even talking about is they use the money to buy food. So again, we're not just giving willy-nilly money away. Jesus never has an example of that.